The European Union, EU, is a joint group of member states that is home to 447 million people and the third largest economy in the world after China and the USA. It is home to 20 member countries that use the euro, which is the second most widely held reserve currency after the US dollar. The EU has a more egalitarian distribution of income and wealth than the world average, but it also makes it easier for things like brain drain and capital fly fights to take place amongst countries with few restrictions in place for people moving to live, work and invest. The richest economy in the EU has a GDP per capita 5 times higher than the poorest country, and some economists are starting to ask questions about its sustainability in the long term. Other major economic problems include the debt crisis, Brexit, war on their doorstep amongst their largest energy supplies, and a general shift towards less economic cooperation. The largest economic threats currently facing the EU are the debt crisis, Brexit, war on their doorstep amongst their largest energy supplies, and a general shift towards less economic cooperation. The EU is not only more likely to break up than a sovereign state like China, but also might have a larger impact on the economy if nothing else. The largest economic threats currently facing the EU are the debt crisis, Brexit, war on their doorstep amongst their largest energy supplies, and a general shift towards less economic cooperation. The EU was formed at the right time, in 1993, as the world was well into the swing of international trade and economic cooperation. The EU's success can be attributed to its ability to foster interdependence and cooperation, as countries traded less, had modern financial infrastructure, and economies were more self-sufficient. However, the future of the EU remains uncertain, and exploring these economic problems can help understand how economic unions like the EU operate. The EU has policies in place to make trade among member nations easier but also make trade among external nations harder. This means countries benefit from being able to freely trade their goods and services, including labor forces, among other member countries with no import tariffs, quotas, or working restrictions. They also benefit from the protections that the EU imposes, making it much harder for local industries to be undercut by cheaper centers outside the EU. The benefits of political cooperation, free trade, a shared currency, and working freely across borders are what hold the EU together. However, these benefits also come with striking the right balance between a centralized authority and maintaining national autonomy. If the EU had more control over its member states, it would become a country like the proposed United States of Europe, which many members would not be happy with. The global pandemic has made working from home more common, as governments acted to slow down the spread of the virus by shutting down factories and controlling shipments. Crossing borders and making working from home more common have also been a major threat to the EU's delicate supply lines. The war in Ukraine has further pushed the idea that countries should maintain their self-sufficiency, making them not totally helpless when external shocks stop the delicate supply lines they become so dependent on. Working from home has made working from anywhere possible, making it possible for companies within Europe to look outside of Europe for highly skilled workers or workers to do the job for a lot less than their European competitors. This process is called brain drain, and it makes it difficult for workers in highly valued roles from countries with lower average salaries to move to other countries where they can be paid more for their work. The benefits of a shared currency are another double-edged sword. On one hand, they make trading commerce between member states much easier and give them access to a world reserve currency, which attracts more confidence internationally than any of their own currencies. However, countries in the EU will never find themselves in that sort of position even if they have debt problems. In the early 2010s, Greece faced economic troubles and brought the Eurozone down, causing economic stagnation for other EU countries. Greece was hurt by using the euro during this time, which helped attract foreign investment, trade, and tourism. If the Greek drachma fell by $30, a trip to the Greek islands became 30 cheaper for international visitors, providing a source of income to pay debts, buy vital imports, and keep citizens' quality of life from collapsing. Pakistan's currency has fallen significantly in recent months, but this process doesn't work at all if the country doesn't have its own free-floating currency. Other EU economies, such as Germany, were doing just fine in exporting highly desirable goods and services. Maintaining the price of the euro in foreign exchange markets is a method that helps maintain the euro's inflexibility. The advantages of the EU outweigh the disadvantages for member states, and countries that have recently become members have enjoyed increased growth rates and overall wealth. However, people tend to see problems more than benefits, and it won't be macroeconomists deciding whether member states stay or not. If the EU collapses, it could hurt economic growth over the next decade, similar to Brexit. The economic cost of Brexit ranges from around 2.5 to 8% of the UK's GDP. In the UK, the estimates for the economic cost of Brexit range from around 2.5 to 8% of the UK's GDP. Questions should be answered about what happens to countries with foreign reserves of euros and how debts are denoted in obsolete currency. While the EU has been the most influential and successful, it's bad economic planning to assume that it will go on forever. Every country in the EU should have a plan for what happens if their country decides to leave or what happens if the Union just falls apart. The European Union has a collective GDP of 17.2 trillion, making it the third largest economy in the world. The EU gets an 8 out of 10 for stability and confidence, with most members being advanced service-based economies. Small economies that are growing don't contribute enough to make up for larger economies that haven't been growing or going backwards. Industry is where the EU shines, sharing technology, manpower, and investment to expand recognizable companies that serve the EU's massive market and add value to the global economy.